I was absolutely burning up inside, just seething with anger, mostly directed at my wife, Susan. I'm Mike Collins. How did I know she was mad at me? Well, she was huddled against the car door like she was trying to melt into it, her expression sour enough to turn fresh milk. Why was she so ticked off at me? Well, I suppose she had her reasons. I had just ruined her evening in a pretty spectacular way. I felt awful about putting a damper on my wife's night, the woman I've been married to for over a decade, and the mother of our 3 kids. I'd really stepped in it this time. So, what exactly had I done to spoil things and embarrass her? It all came down to me grabbing the wrong key. You see, the Hendersons, our next-door neighbors, are known for throwing these crazy parties. Susan had been dying to get an invite, and she finally managed to snag one through a friend of a friend. Now, we'd never been to one of their shindigs before, and my wife, who I've shared my life with for 10 years, conveniently left out a key detail: this wasn't your typical gathering. She hadn't mentioned that at this party, all the wives were supposed to toss their house keys into a bowl, and then the husbands would pick a key at random and take the matching wife to the master bedroom for a not-so-innocent rendezvous. As the night was winding down, it hit me what was about to go down, and I just lost it. I don't think I've ever been so furious with Susan. I grabbed her by the arm and pulled her into the kitchen. Did you know this is how the party would end? I asked, my voice barely containing my rage. She gave me a smug little grin. Yeah. And you didn't think to clue me in before we got here? I pressed, feeling my blood boil. No, she shot back, because I knew you'd say no if I gave you a heads up. Well, you're right about that. I would have never agreed, and I always have a say in this marriage. Now, let's get out of here, I snapped. We can't just leave now, Susan argued. That'd be rude. Besides, it's just for one night. It could spice things up for us. I don't need that kind of spice in my life. We're leaving, I replied firmly. She put up a bit of a fight, but I shook off her grip and marched over to the bowl full of keys. I wasn't told this was part of the party, I declared to everyone standing around the bowl. I'm not sharing my wife with any of you. I rummaged through the keys until I found ours, the one with the red plastic cover, and held it up for all to see. Nobody informed me of these rules ahead of time, and I don't believe in cheating. My marriage vows mean everything to me, I said, my voice steady. There were a few disgruntled murmurs, and some folks shot me dirty looks, but I didn't care one bit. I turned to my wife, who was now standing there, face flushed with anger and humiliation. Susan, I said, you need to make a choice, right here and now. You can come with me and leave this nonsense behind, or you can stay and never come back home. I'm walking out. The room fell silent, all eyes on her as she stood there, hesitating before she finally spoke. I apologize for my husband's behavior, she said to the crowd. I'd love to stay, but I guess I should leave, given the situation. With clear frustration and reluctance, she trailed after me out to the car. You selfish jerk, she screamed at me the moment we got inside. How could you humiliate me like that in front of everyone? We're never getting invited to anything like that again. Humiliate you, Susan? I shot back. What about the way you humiliated me by not even telling me about your plan to be with another man tonight? Well, you would have been with another wife, too. It would have been fun for both of us, she retorted. I don't want to be with another woman, Susan, I said, my voice filled with hurt. I saved that for you, and it's heartbreaking to find out that after 10 years of marriage, you're craving to be with someone else. It would have just been this once, Mike, she said. Out of all the nights we've had together, it's just a single night with someone else. After being a good wife for 10 years, don't you think that's fair? Honestly, Susan, no, it's not, I replied. I can't even wrap my head around what I'm hearing. But it seems like this is really important to you, isn't it? Yes, Mike, it is, she admitted. I've been looking forward to this for weeks now. It's my chance to be more than just a wife and mother, to have a little adventure, to feel admired, to have some fun with another man for a few hours. I slammed my foot on the brakes and spun the car around, speeding back toward the Hendersons' house. Susan screamed as I made the sudden turn. "What on earth are you doing, Mike?" she demanded. "If being with another man for a night means so much to you, Susan, then go ahead," I said, my voice filled with cold resolve. "Get out of the car. Enjoy yourself with some random guy. I hope he gives you everything you think I can't." "It's just something new, an adventure," she said, her hand reaching for the door handle. "You're perfect for me, Mike, but you know I can't do this alone. We both have to join in, each with a new partner." "I've already made it clear that I'm not taking part, Susan," I said firmly. "I've never cheated on you, and I won't start now, not until we're no longer married." "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, her voice suddenly losing its edge. "It means exactly what it sounds like," I replied bluntly. "It's time for you to make a decision, Susan." She hesitated, and I could see the gears turning in her mind, weighing her options. "Would you pick me up tomorrow morning, Mike?" she asked quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "You know, from wherever I end up. I'll call and let you know. It would mean a lot to me." "Not a chance," I said, my tone as cold as steel. "I'm sure your new guy can drive you home after spending the night together." "You're making this sound so terrible, Mike," she said, her eyes welling up with tears. "He won't be my lover, it's just a few hours of closeness with someone new. I love you, Mike. You're the only man for me. Do you even believe that, Susan?" I asked, my voice dripping with disbelief. "There's no way you could love me and still go through with what you're planning. Let me get this straight, you just want some new guy for a night of intimacy, right? Is this about having another man father a child with you?" "That's harsh, Mike," she cried, tears now streaming down her face. "You know I'm on birth control, so I can't get pregnant. It's just one thrilling night with someone new. I won't let you ruin this for me," she added, her voice growing firmer. "I just want a little time with someone different, and you're not going to stop me. I'm doing this, and you'll have to accept it. Got it? Tomorrow morning, I'll be back, and I'll make you forget this ever happened," she said with forced confidence. "You'll still want me, Mike. I'll make sure of that. I won't desire you anymore after you've let another man take what I thought was mine alone," I said, my voice heavy with the weight of betrayal. "Now you're just being ridiculous, Mike," she retorted, exasperation clear in her voice. "I belong to you, and you'll still want me. I'll see to it." "Susan, listen to me," I said urgently, trying to make her understand. "If you go back into that house, we're finished. Your one night will cost you your marriage and your family." "No, Mike, it won't," she argued, a false bravado in her voice. "We're married, and that's not changing. We're meant to be together. I love you, and I know you love me. We'll get through this, I promise." "You're breaking my heart, Susan," I said, my voice cracking with pain. "Don't be so dramatic, Mike," she replied, clearly annoyed. "Just think of it as sending me off on an adventure." "It might be an adventure for you, but it's the end of the road for us," I said, my tone cold and resolute. She swung the car door open and began to step out. "I'll see you tomorrow morning, Mike," she called out, her voice laced with false confidence. I shook my head sadly, and the moment she pushed the door shut, I hit the gas pedal hard, leaving skid marks stretching halfway down the block. I glanced back at her in the rearview mirror as I sped away. She stood there, stunned, mouth hanging open, frozen on the curb. She hadn't moved by the time I turned the corner and she vanished from my view. Deep down, I hoped she'd call right then, admit she was wrong, and beg me to come back for her. But that call never came. No, she probably figured I'd cool off in a couple of days, and then she could smooth things over with a night in bed. Well, she had it all wrong. My dad used to say that if a woman is even thinking about cheating, she's already crossed that line in her mind. And if a married woman seriously considers going through with it, she's already broken her vows. It's one thing to admire someone, but once she's scheming to make it happen, the betrayal is already done. As painful as it was, Susan had just put an end to our marriage, and I knew I needed to move on. The real heartbreak was for our 3 kids, 9-year-old Jenny, 8-year-old Megan, and 4-year-old Danny. How could I even imagine life without seeing them every single day? But I couldn't let what Susan had done slide without facing the consequences. The kids were spending the weekend with my mom, giving me a bit of time to figure out my next move. I drove around with no particular destination in mind, holding on to a sliver of hope that Susan might call and ask me to come get her. But as the minutes dragged on, it became clear she'd made her choice. Eventually, I settled on a plan and headed back home. Just as I was pulling into the driveway, my phone rang. I hoped it was Susan, ready to be picked up, but the caller ID told me otherwise. I answered it anyway. There was loud music and laughter blaring in the background, and then a man's voice came on the line. "Hey Mike, it's Steve from the party you left. Susan gave me your number. She's really excited about tonight and wants you to be part of it too. Man, you're lucky, every guy here is hoping to grab her key. She keeps saying it's going to be a night to remember. Why don't you come back and join us? There are some pretty hot ladies here just waiting to have a good time with you." "Go to hell, Steve," I snarled, my voice brimming with rage. "And you can tell everyone else at that damn party, including my cheating wife, that I hope you all get exactly what's coming to you." I hung up and stormed into the house. It took me less than 20 minutes to pack 2 suitcases with enough clothes for a week or 2. I grabbed my laptop, threw in my shaving kit, and hauled everything out to the car. Then, I went on a hunt for our wedding license. Once I found it, I tore it to shreds. Not stopping there, I grabbed a hammer and went to work on my wedding ring. It took a few good swings to flatten it completely, but once I set the mangled pieces on Susan's pillow. After that, I locked up the house and drove off into the night. I figured I'd find a motel a few miles outside of town, but first, I swung by the Hendersons' place one last time. A few cars had already left, and there were small groups chatting outside as they paired up for the night. I didn't spot Susan, so I assumed she had either gone off with her new partner or was upstairs with Mr. Henderson himself. The motel I found was in the next town over. It wasn't anything fancy, but it had parking around the back, which was perfect if I wanted to keep my car out of sight in case anyone came looking. After securing the car, I popped into the convenience store next door and picked up a 6-pack of beer, figuring it might help me unwind. The first 2 beers took the edge off, and as I cracked open the third, my phone rang. It was Susan. But I knew she wasn't calling to ask for a ride home, so I let it go straight to voicemail. "Mike, you're just being overly dramatic," came Susan's voice through the voicemail. "Steve Wilson told me what you said to him. I've told you so many times, it's just for tonight. I'm just trying something new with one guy, and that doesn't make me a bad person. I promise, even if I'm a little sore, I'll make it up to you when I get home. And since you took our house key out of the bowl, they made a new one for me. The guy who got it is named Eric, and he seems nice. He's married with kids, just like us. Since you're at the house, I went with him to his place. His wife and her partner are here too, but they're off in another room, far enough away that we won't hear each other when things start heating up. You know how loud I can get when we're together." She giggled. "Look, I know you're upset, but I promise I won't let him do anything we haven't done before. I told Eric we should keep it simple, just the usual stuff. He agreed, especially since it's my first time with someone else. He'll drop me off tomorrow, and I'll make sure to clean up before I come back. No sloppy seconds for you. Sweet dreams, lover. See you in the morning." I felt like I was about to be sick. I never realized I was married to such a naive woman. Sure, Susan had always been a little clueless, that was part of her charm. But now, that cluelessness was glaring, and it had just cost her our marriage and possibly her kids. There was no way she thought I'd ever take her back after letting another man have her, then rubbing it in my face. I was sure everyone at that party had a good laugh at my expense. I was furious, hurt, and utterly humiliated, and my wife couldn't have cared less. I should have just ignored her message, but I couldn't help myself. I called her back, and she answered on the third ring. "Hey, honey, Eric and I just got cozy in bed, so I can't chat for long," she said, her voice dripping with a fake sweetness. "Shut up, Susan," I snapped, my voice shaking with anger. "This might be the last time you ever hear from me. You have no idea what you've just done, but you'll find out soon enough. Go ahead and enjoy your time with Eric, because the fallout will be worse than you can imagine. Listen closely, Susan, once he touches you, our marriage is over. Do you hear me? Over. I never thought I'd say this, but I hate you more right now than I ever loved you," I continued, my voice thick with pain and betrayal. "I can't wait to wash my hands of you entirely. My lawyer will be in touch next week." I hung up, and not even 30 seconds later, she called back. I let it go to voicemail. "Mike, why are you acting like this?" she cried in the voicemail, sounding on the verge of tears. "How could you say those things to me? I'm your wife. Can't you let me have this one night? Eric and I just started, and now you're ruining it for me. I don't know if I can even enjoy being with him like I wanted to now. We are not getting divorced. I'll be home in the morning, and we can talk this out. I would come home now, but I promised Eric I'd stay with him tonight. Please understand, honey, I have to do this. He got my key, and I promised him he could have me. He really wants this. Oh God, please, yes, please try to understand, darling. I'll see you in the morning." I couldn't stop myself. I called her back, and this time, it rang several times before going to voicemail. "From that last voicemail, I can tell you and Eric have already started, and you're actually enjoying it," I said, my voice cold as ice. "You go ahead and spend the night with him, feeling all those new sensations he's giving you, Susan, but you couldn't keep a promise to the man who's loved you and stayed faithful for over 10 years. I don't even recognize you anymore. You won't see me in the morning, and you might never see me again. But you will be getting divorce papers next week, and I'll be filing on grounds of adultery. Now that Eric is doing what only I should be allowed to do, you're officially a cheater. From now on, you can cheat with whoever you want, but I'll make sure to keep my promise to never be with you again." Susan didn't call me back. I knew how completely she lost herself during intimacy. It was like she entered a world where nothing else existed except for her and the man she was with. By now, I was sure they were entirely wrapped up in each other. I finished the rest of the six-pack, and the alcohol did its job. I eventually passed out, tears still wet on my cheeks. A few hours later, I woke up, and reality hit me square in the face. My wife had taken a lover, and now I needed to figure out how to protect my kids, get her out of my life, and make everyone at that party pay for their part in this mess. We lived in a small Texas town, and thankfully, Texas law recognized adultery as grounds for divorce. This could help me avoid paying alimony and maybe even secure custody of my children. I needed a top-notch lawyer, and I needed one fast. I took a shower and changed into fresh clothes. At 7:30, I called my mom and laid out everything that had happened. She was just as shocked as I was about Susan's behavior. She had the kids for the weekend and assured me that she wouldn't say anything to them. I told her I'd come to pick them up as soon as I had a plan in place. As much as it pained me to admit, Susan would probably get custody of the kids, at least in the short term. Up until last night, she'd been a great mother and wife. After hanging up with my mom, I headed over to the nearby diner for some breakfast. As I pulled into the parking lot and started walking towards the entrance, my phone rang. It was Susan. I hesitated, debating whether to answer, but in the end, I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message, though. Instead, she called back immediately, over and over, until she finally left a message, sobbing frantically. "Pick up the damn phone, John. Talk to me. What did you mean when you said I might never see you again? And what's all this talk about divorce papers? You can't leave me, John. We have 3 beautiful kids who need us both. Why did you tear up our marriage license and destroy your wedding ring? I gave you that ring on our wedding day, and you promised to wear it forever. It's supposed to symbolize our eternal love. I knew you'd be a little upset, but I never imagined you'd take it this far. John, I love you so much, but I really needed that special night with Eric. It meant so much to me. He made me feel alive and young again. I forgot how thrilling it is to laugh and scream at the same time. But even though last night was amazing, John, you're the only man I want. I know how to make it up to you and heal your hurt feelings. Just come home so I can show you how much I love you and make this right." She started crying again, and her words became harder to understand. "John, why can't you see that I just needed one night with someone new to feel desired and wanted again? It was just a moment, John, nothing more. Please, John, talk to me. I love you. You and our kids mean everything to me." Her voice grew weaker, and she continued to sob until the message cut off. I stood there outside the diner, completely stunned. Had Susan been holding on to these feelings throughout our entire marriage, and they just now surfaced in her mid-30s? She was still as gorgeous as ever, standing at 5 feet 5 inches with a trim 130-pound figure, dark blonde hair cascading to her shoulders, and striking light blue eyes. She had an incredible physique, and her curves were perfect in my eyes. Sure, her hips had widened a bit after having our 3 kids, but she still turned heads wherever she went. So what was this nonsense about needing to feel desired by another man? I'd always shown her how much I loved and wanted her. I'd surprised her with flowers, taken her out on weekly date nights, and told her every single day how beautiful she was and how much I cherished her. Our intimate life had been amazing, or at least, I thought it was. We made love at least 3 times a week, and I always made sure she had 1 or more peeks. I had no appetite, but I went into the diner anyway. I found an empty table and ordered some scrambled eggs, toast, and a black coffee. I barely touched my breakfast, but I must have downed at least 6 cups of coffee. I'd never felt so lost, so empty, or so utterly devastated in my life. I'd heard people say they wished they were dead, and for the first time, I understood what they meant. The only thing keeping me from falling apart completely was the thought of my kids. I had to keep going for them. I needed to navigate through the hell Susan had created and build a future for my children. That thought alone gave me the determination I needed. I would persevere. Susan called my phone about 20 times that day, but I let every single one go to voicemail. She kept pleading with me to understand, yet not once did she apologize for her actions. She never admitted that she'd made a mistake. Instead, she insisted that she needed that one night and that it was my job to support her. She bragged about how they'd been together 3 times that night and once more in the morning. She even mentioned worrying that she hadn't turned her phone off quickly enough, fearing I might have overheard them during the first round, right when Eric had finished up. She'd really hit where it hurt the most. I couldn't believe how foolish she had been. But there was a silver lining. I now had solid audio evidence of her infidelity to use in court. While I wasn't sure if it would be enough, the recordings were pretty damning, leaving no room for doubt. Tomorrow, I'd start looking for a good lawyer and begin gathering everything I needed. That afternoon, I went to see my kids at my mom's house. She told me that Susan had already called to check on the kids and ask about my whereabouts. Mom explained to her that I was upset about what had happened and didn't want to see or speak to her. Apparently, Susan started crying, claiming that I just didn't understand. Mom told her, flat out, that no man understands a wife flaunting an affair right in front of his face. Susan asked if she should come and get the kids, but Mom suggested that it might be better if they stayed with her for a few more days until things calmed down. The kids were thrilled to see me, though they kept asking where their mom was. I told them she was busy with something important and that they'd be staying with Grandma a little longer. We played games and had dinner together, and when it was time to say goodbye, I hugged and kissed them before heading back to my motel. Tomorrow was going to be a long, chaotic day. Before turning in for the night, I had one more thing to do, or more accurately, a quick drive-by. When I pulled up near my house, tears welled up in my eyes. I cried for everything that was lost, knowing there was no going back. I was surprised to see that there were no strange cars in the driveway, though one might have been tucked away in the garage. The only light on was the one in the kitchen, making me think Susan was alone, at least for tonight. And that's when it hit me, I still had feelings for her. No, I wouldn't take her back after what she'd done, but it tore me up inside to think about her with another man. I tried to resist the urge to spy on her, but in the end, I gave in. I parked a block away and walked back to the house, sneaking a glance through the kitchen window. She was sitting at the table with an empty vodka bottle next to her. Her hair was a mess, and mascara streaks lined her cheeks. She wore a robe and had her head resting on the table, eyes closed. The pile of tissues around her made it clear she'd been crying for a while. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but then the memory of her betrayal washed over me, and any trace of pity disappeared. I wanted to lash out, to scream at her, but instead, I walked back to my car and drove away. There was a small hint of satisfaction, though. Maybe she was finally starting to grasp the severity of what she'd done. If she wanted someone to feel sorry for her, she could call her lover Eric. Monday came faster than I'd expected, and I had a full schedule lined up. I started my day at the diner with eggs, toast, and coffee, and this time, I finished every bite. After that, I gave my mom a call and spoke to each of my kids, reassuring them of my love and promising to see them soon. Then, I contacted my job, letting my executive assistant know that I'd be dealing with some personal matters for the next couple of days. I told her she could call or text if anything urgent came up. She sensed something was off, but I didn't go into details, saying I'd explain later. Back in my final year of college, I'd shared an apartment with two close friends, Dave and Tom. We'd formed a tight bond, and though we didn't see each other often, we stayed in touch over the years. I majored in computer science, Dave studied business administration, and Tom went on to pursue a career in law. I called up Dave first and asked if both of them could meet me for drinks around 5. I told him I needed their advice on a serious matter, and he agreed to reach out to Tom. We planned to meet at a bar down by the beach. I got there early, and just after 5, Tom showed up, followed by Dave about 10 minutes later. We greeted each other warmly and found a table out on the patio. We ordered some drinks and raised our glasses. "So, what's going on, Mike?" Dave asked, concern in his voice. "Your call sounded pretty serious." "Susan cheated on me and made sure I knew all about it," I admitted, and then I laid out the whole story for them. "Man, that's rough," Dave said, shaking his head. "I can't even begin to understand why she'd do something like that." "Same here," Tom added. "But what gets me is that she went through with it without any shame or remorse. And now, she thinks I'm the one overreacting," I said, still in disbelief. "So, what's your next move, Mike?" Tom asked, taking a slow sip of his beer. "I want a divorce, and I want to make sure this Glenn guy, whoever he is, and those other jerks at the party, learn a lesson," I replied, my voice steely with resolve. "But more than anything, I'm fighting for custody of my kids." "Getting custody isn't going to be easy, Mike," Tom cautioned. "Unless you can prove she's been neglectful, like if she's bringing random guys into the house and having affairs while the kids are around, you might have a case. Otherwise, if she's generally been a good mother, chances are she'll get custody, and you'll be on the hook for child support. I can live with that as long as I get to spend as much time with them as possible, I replied, and Tom nodded. Courts usually aim for both parents to be involved in the kids' upbringing, provided both are fit, he explained. What about the finances, Mike? Dave chimed in, changing the topic. Susan stays home with the kids, and you're likely bringing in a six-figure income. What's in your accounts, checking, savings, investments, 401(k)s, IRAs? When you add it all up, it's probably close to 700 or 800 grand, maybe even more. The court will likely split that evenly and give Susan the house and custody, Tom added. But if you can prove she cheated, and it sounds like you have solid evidence, you might be able to avoid paying alimony. Do you know any top-notch divorce lawyers? I asked. As luck would have it, Tom did. One of the partners at his firm was a top family law attorney in Texas. Her name was Lisa, and he offered to set up a meeting for me. We raised our glasses one more time, had a couple more drinks, and said our goodbyes. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of relief. On the drive back to the motel, my mind raced with all the tasks that lay ahead. Then, my phone rang. When I saw the caller ID, I knew it was Susan. After a moment's hesitation, I pulled over to answer. What do you want, Susan? I asked, cutting straight to the point. What do you think, Mike? She replied, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I want my husband back home where he belongs. Well, too bad for you, Susan. Your little fling with Eric makes it impossible for me to ever come back, I said, my tone firm and unyielding. She broke down into sobs. Don't say that, Mike. You can't, she begged. It was just one night after 10 years, and that's not grounds for a divorce. Think again, Susan, I replied coldly. When a married woman sleeps with another man, whether it's for one night or just a moment, it's called adultery. I warned you countless times, and I meant every word. You brought this on yourself. Oh God, Mike, you can't do this to me, she cried, but I stayed unmoved. You can't do this to our kids, she added, but I knew I was doing it for them. You tore our family apart with your selfishness, Susan, I said, my voice heavy with pain and betrayal. You shattered our lives into pieces that can never be put back together. First and foremost, you broke my heart, I continued. You completely disregarded my feelings, the feelings of the man who has loved you unconditionally since the day we met. The man who works hard every day to provide the life you and the kids deserve. You threw all of that away for a stranger, trampling on the vows we made in front of our family, friends, and God. You pledged yourself to me, Susan, but last night, you made it clear you'd do whatever you wanted, no matter how much I begged you not to. I never meant for it to seem like that, Mike, she said, but I knew she had meant every word. I don't know why, but I didn't realize I was hurting you. I just wanted to try something different. I love you, Mike. This wasn't about me, Susan, I replied, disbelief lacing my words. It was about you and Eric, with no regard for me or our children. You decided you deserved a special night for yourself, and in doing so, you tore apart our family. You've lost your marriage and likely damaged your reputation with everyone who matters. Maybe someday I'll forgive you, but I'll never forget. And trust me, everyone will know what you've done. No, Mike, please, she sobbed. My parents would be devastated. You can't do this to me. Too late, Susan. You should have thought about that before you acted, I said, and then I hung up. I felt a rush of satisfaction, knowing I had finally stood up for myself and my kids. It was a small step toward moving on from this nightmare. The following day, I met with Lisa, the divorce lawyer Mark had recommended. She was direct and no-nonsense, quickly getting to the heart of things. She wanted to know why I was seeking a divorce and what I hoped to get out of it. I explained that I was prepared to divide our assets, possibly giving Susan the house in exchange for keeping more cash. I also acknowledged that, despite filing for adultery, winning full custody of my kids would be tough. However, I insisted on having unlimited access to them and avoiding alimony payments. I played the audio recordings I had, where Susan repeatedly admitted to her actions with Eric. Lisa shook her head in disbelief, shocked at how careless my wife had been to leave voicemails that could be used against her in court. "We might need a voice recognition expert to verify it's your wife's voice," she explained. "But as long as we don't get an unreasonable judge, these recordings should be admissible as evidence." We spent the rest of the hour discussing my plans regarding Eric and the others from the wife-swapping party. Lisa was doubtful we could win any money from them, but she promised to find a way to expose their activities publicly and embarrass them enough to cause some damage. I told her that would be more than enough for me. I paid Lisa a retainer and asked her to serve Susan as soon as possible. She assured me it wouldn't take long and promised to give me a heads up before it happened. On Tuesday afternoon, I picked up my kids from my mom's place and took them back to Susan's house. When she greeted them, she hugged and kissed them warmly. Then, she reached out to me, but I stepped back, causing her to tear up and beg me to stay. I explained that I couldn't, but I felt it was best for the kids to be at home with her. I planned to pick them up again on Friday for the weekend. Susan seemed to be struggling, and while I sympathized with her, she had brought this situation on herself. Whatever she was going through couldn't compare to the pain she had put me through. By Wednesday, I returned to work. I knew I couldn't afford to neglect my job. I needed it now more than ever, not just for the income, but for the mental distraction. Dwelling too much on the pain and self-pity from Susan's betrayal would only push me closer to the edge of losing my sanity, something I couldn't allow, not for my kids' sake. On Thursday, I met up with Dave and Tom again, this time for dinner at a restaurant near the beach. I gave them an update on how my kids were doing and where things stood with the divorce proceedings. Dave had some good news for me. He'd been researching ways to safeguard some of my money and found a legal way to do it. He explained that I could place a portion of my funds into a trust for my kids, which would be considered their property, not mine. This would protect the money in the event of a divorce while still benefiting my children. I was grateful for his help and agreed to move forward with the plan. We also brainstormed a way to stir up trouble for the wife-swapping club without crossing any legal lines. Tom mentioned that he had a friend who worked as a reporter for a local newspaper. If I could provide the address of the Hendersons' house and the times when the group met, his friend could potentially uncover the names of some participants. Tom suggested that the reporter could write an editorial hinting that wife-swapping was more common in our town than people realized. By alluding to the involvement of certain business owners, without directly naming them, and getting photos of couples entering and leaving the meetings, we could create enough controversy to cause problems for the group. I shared what limited information I had with Tom, and he agreed to start looking into it. With our plan set in motion, we said our goodbyes until the next time. My weekend with the kids was incredible. We went shopping for new clothes, caught a movie at the theater, and spent a whole day at the beach, swimming and tossing a frisbee. My children were my top priority, and I made a promise to myself that I would always be there for them, no matter what. Monday morning, Tom called me with some exciting news. His reporter friend liked the story idea and was working on how to capture photos of the couples entering and leaving the Hendersons' house. Even if the faces were blurred, people in our small town would catch on pretty quickly. If everything went according to plan, the article could make headlines by the end of the week. I crossed my fingers, hoping that our scheme would work and that the wife-swapping group would get the public attention they deserved. On Wednesday, my lawyer called to let me know that Susan had been served with the divorce papers at our house. Then, on Friday morning, Dave called with more good news. He had managed to secure about a third of my money by placing it into a trust for my kids, and he had already started the process. Later, Tom reached out to tell me that his reporter friend had found out that the wife-swapping couples were planning to meet again at the Hendersons' house on Friday night. He had a plan to stake out across the street in an unmarked van to capture photos of everyone coming and going. The reporter also wanted to interview me again about the party, and I agreed to meet him on Saturday. If everything went smoothly, the article could make the headlines in the following week's edition, stirring up some controversy in our small town. I was feeling better than I had in a long time, knowing that I was taking steps to protect myself and my kids while also exposing the wife-swapping group. Friday came, and I waited for the call I knew would come from Susan after she received the divorce papers. Sure enough, it came around 2:30. My lawyer had already called to inform me that she had been served, and not long after, my phone rang again. Seeing her name on the caller ID, I couldn't help but chuckle, wondering what she wanted. I thought about letting it go to voicemail, but I changed my mind and picked up. "Hey, Susan, what's up?" I answered casually. "What on earth have you done, Mike?" Her tone was anything but friendly. "I filed for divorce, just like I said I would," I replied calmly. "And I told you there wouldn't be a divorce." "And you filed for adultery," she snapped, her voice rising with every word. "One night with another man isn't adultery, Mike." "I'd have to disagree with you there, Susan," I said, my voice steady. "According to Texas law, sleeping with someone other than your spouse is adultery, and that's exactly what you did with Eric." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she started to cry. "Why are you being so cruel, Mike?" she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I love you. All Eric did was be with me a few times. It was just a fling." "My mistake, Susan," I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I must have misunderstood the definition of adultery. Silly me, how could I have gotten that wrong? Just let it go, Mike. It's over," she begged. "I warned you countless times, and I pleaded with you not to go through with it, but you did it anyway," I said, my voice growing colder with each word. "Now, you have to deal with the consequences, and trust me, your troubles aren't ending here. Goodbye, Susan," I added, my tone final. "Have a miserable life." And with that, I hung up. The hardest part was that I still had feelings for Susan. Maybe I always would. But I couldn't trust her anymore, and I certainly couldn't stay married to someone who had betrayed me. I knew I shouldn't go near the Hendersons' house that night, but I couldn't resist driving by just once to see what was happening. I also wanted to check if Susan's car was there, though I doubted she would attend the party this time. Her car wasn't in sight, but then again, she could have gone with someone else. They usually only allowed couples, but they had made an exception for her once, so who's to say they wouldn't do it again? I noticed a van parked across the street, which was probably where the reporter was stationed. I silently wished him luck in exposing the whole operation. The results came quickly. The next afternoon, Tom's reporter friend called me, asking for some insider information, which I gladly provided. He mentioned that he had taken over 100 photos and recognized more than a dozen prominent couples from the city. Strangely, they weren't the same couples seen leaving the house 2 hours later. Tom had given him a photo of my wife, and the reporter confirmed that she wasn't among those entering or exiting the Hendersons' residence. He wanted me to describe what I had seen and experienced during my brief time inside at one of those key parties. I did my best to explain how the keys were placed into a bowl, though I had never actually witnessed the part where the men picked a key and left with the corresponding woman. However, from my wife's description and overhearing other couples' conversations about previous parties, I had a pretty clear idea of what went down. Before we ended the call, he asked if he could mention that he was aware of a marriage that had ended because of these parties, leaving the children to deal with their parents' divorce. I told him that was fine as long as no names were included. The article came out in the Sunday edition of the paper, and it caused quite a stir. It made the front page, featuring a large photo of couples entering and leaving, their faces blurred. The story continued over 4 more pages, with numerous additional photos. Despite the efforts to obscure identities, it was easy to recognize participants by their cars and clothing, since they were well-known members of our small-town community. By Monday, the entire town was buzzing about it. Several ministers were interviewed about the decline in morality, and civic leaders condemned the situation. Although lawsuits were filed, nothing significant came of them. Some businesses lost customers, and many couples found themselves in divorce court. For me, it was a satisfying bit of payback for the pain I had gone through losing my wife and family. Even if people realized that I had been cheated on, I didn't care. I had my revenge, and that was all that mattered. Susan kept trying to win me back for months, but I stood firm in my decision. The divorce went through, and I secured joint custody of our kids. We alternated time with them. When I had them for the month, Susan had them on weekends and vice versa. It wasn't ideal, but we managed. Since she didn't contest anything in the divorce, I decided against sharing the recordings of her admitting to the affair with her family or friends. As for the couples involved in the key parties, some ended up divorcing and even leaving town, likely because of the scandal. Susan started dating again, though I wasn't sure she fully grasped why her actions had hurt me so deeply. But that was her problem now, and I wished her future partner the best of luck. I went on dates with a few wonderful women, but I hadn't found the one I wanted to settle down with just yet. A couple of them suggested moving in together, but I was still hesitant to give anyone a key to my place. It had been a difficult year, but I came out stronger on the other side. I learned a lot about myself and what I truly wanted in a partner. I also discovered that I could handle whatever life threw my way as long as I had my kids with me. I knew I would never forget what Susan had done, but I also knew I had to move forward. I couldn't let her actions define me or stop me from finding happiness again. As I sat on the beach, watching my kids play in the sand, a deep sense of peace washed over me. I knew that as long as I had my family and friends by my side, everything would be all right. I took a deep breath of the salty air and allowed myself to smile, feeling that the future was bright and full of possibilities. I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing I'd come out stronger on the other side. And who knows? Maybe one day, I'd meet a woman who would love me and my kids unconditionally, a woman who would never betray our family. But until that day came, I was content with the life I had and the love that surrounded me. I looked out at the horizon, watching the sun slowly dip into the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was a stunning sight, and I felt a deep gratitude for the simple things in life. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, I gathered up the kids and headed back to the car, ready to face whatever tomorrow had in store. I knew I was a survivor, and nothing, not even a cheating spouse, could break me. Starting the car, I pulled out of the parking lot, heading toward a future that was uncertain but filled with hope. I had everything I needed to be happy, and for now, that was more than enough. Driving down the highway, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked older, wiser, and stronger than I'd ever been. I grinned at myself, knowing I was ready for whatever life might throw my way. With that thought in mind, I turned up the radio, singing along to the music as the wind blew through my hair, letting the worries of the past fade into the night. I was free, and nothing could hold me back anymore.